especially with young men, right? Like that to me is the essence of what we're talking about. I'm sure you might agree as a parent is, we take what we experienced growing up and we try to remix it in a way that we get a better outcome. We want like
Hmm.
better relationships,
Hmm.
maybe more comfortability, being open, things like that. So that goes to the heart of what we're discussing. Then we have to be, we as the fathers, right? Parents
Yeah,
in general, but in the fathers in this case, we
yeah,
have to be intentional about creating that space for our sons so that they know that that's normal and that that's okay.
absolutely,
To fight exactly what you outlined, to fight that. If we don't want you to
absolutely.
have multiple failed relationships, not that you won't have any, right? We can't prevent everything, but that we can try to a certain degree to make you not have to go so far down that painful road that it might end up skewing your perception of reality.
Hmm.
But I have to be willing as your father to give you my experience. I have to bare my soul to you so that you can learn, right?
Yeah,
You can learn from my, and if you don't have a father, hopefully you have a male role model like Mr. Cook who may be willing to tell you a bit about some of those experiences or help you get yourself into therapy to learn to work out some of that stuff. So again, you don't have to have those outcomes. That's a big issue that I try to echo that sentiment every single time I'm talking to somebody because I know how hard it is. I understand fully the
hmm,
mountain of opposition, you could say, that I'm
hmm,
against because
hmm,
I am only one person, I am one parent, I am one therapist. I am not, everybody's not on this wave yet, but I'm hoping to encourage others to speak out. And if we recognize that we don't like these outcomes, we're tired of it, then we need to go back to the drawing board and understand we created these monsters.
hmm.
Not that young men are monsters, but these situations, we created them to make them, in many cases, facilitate them turning out like this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
hopefully that's my, I'll get off that soapbox now.
Well, I mean, to
um
your point, right? With our sons, even my daughter, but
mhm,
when we're talking about boys, like
right.
I didn't. My dad wasn't around, like I said, but he's. It's funny because I just took my kids. They met their black side of the family for the first time. I just took them to
Mm,
DC at the beginning of this year.
okay.
Um, and it's interesting because I'm not raised around my black family, but I was telling my partner, I was like, yo, it's interesting because I was like, you know how you talking about I'm extra? I said I'm around my black family and I'm like, yo, they so extra. Like they extra about this is where I get it from. Like I'm not even around them and I picked this up from them, but
Yeah.
they're very loving, very when I say extra, like celebratory, I celebrate people. It's just part of my it's part of who I am. We don't say
Yeah.
it often enough, so when I say it I make sure I put a little extra sauce on it, just to make sure people really get the message, bring a
Yeah.
smile to their face. And my family is very much that way. The black side of my family is that way. um, but I wasn't raised that way. I mean, my mom, um, if mom, if you ever watch this, I love you. We're beyond this. This is past. This is a matter of fact.
Right.
Um, but she didn't. With my brother, she was super loving to my brother, but for me, she wasn't. In fact, she didn't say "I love you" to me until I was 25,
Mm,
and that was the first time she hugged me. Well, I take it back. The last time she hugged me, I was in fourth grade. That's when I was in an alternative school for knocking out my teacher, and they let me come back to my regular school. And she picked me up and she drove me to school and she gave me a hug. That was the last time she hugged me again until I was 25 when
mm,
I got my master's degree. That was the first time she hugged me. So I
man.
went all that
That's
time, 21 years, watching her be affectionate to my brother, super loving. But I'm here like what I got straight A's, mom. Like I'm taking care of myself. Like I'm doing big things. My brother's getting in trouble. Like you're super loving to him. Like what I got to do? Like I thought this is what I would do to get love, right? So when I became a parent, I said it was difficult. It is still a challenge, but it's a bit more natural for me. But my sons all the time, I love you. Give me a hug. Where you going? You, you just gonna walk away? You ain't gonna give me no hug? I don't care if you're freaking out. Let's go. I want a hug, right? Especially my oldest, I work with him a lot about vocalizing his emotions because he doesn't. So I see in him what I used to struggle with, but he's in an environment where I'm not suppressing it, I'm
Correct.
inviting it, but that invitation is there, but there still has to be where he accepts the invitation, because if I force
Absolutely.
it, then it's going to do the exact same thing where it's suppressed. Whereas my youngest son, RJ, I look at him wrong, tears. I used to get so frustrated, like, boy, I need you to I can't have a conversation with you like this. And then it dawned on me about a year ago. So he's 13 now, so he was 12. It was about a year ago. I looked at him and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I had this wave of empathy run over me, and I was like, he's his father's son. He is his father's son, and I got to do a better job of teaching him how to process his emotions, communicate his emotions, and to be honest, to not be overly emotional, because you can be too far on the other side where emotions is just running your life and it's just you're vomiting it, right? Like
there's guardrails, right? We have to have a balance.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in the bowling alley and we're putting the rails up. So I'm trying to teach them how to stay within the alley, the lane,
bumper
right?
lanes.
Yeah. So that's been my process with him. I've been a bit more intentional about that over since I had that revelation. I mean, I was before. Like, I always told him, listen, your emotions are not a bad thing. It's just when they get skewed and that's what's running you, then we have a problem, because you're running over people and doing stuff out of emotion that you're going to later regret, right? So like with him, we talk a lot. We talk a lot about emotions, how you feel, what you're thinking. Let's connect thought and feeling, which came first. Like, I can therapize with him and he therapizes back with me. But I think there's something to be said with our young boys, especially if you're a parent, to have those type of conversations. Normalize emotions, normalize talking about your emotions, and normalize having open discussions about how does this impact our relationship, and what does this look like going forward. RJ, even this, as a father, I'm not perfect, Ross. I mess up all the time.
Same.
But one of the things that I do with my kids, I just had this conversation with them the other day, because I told them, like, y'all have to do a better job of owning your stuff. I said, I model for y'all. I said, think back now. There is not a time where I mess up that I don't come back and apologize to you. As your father, my bad. I disrespected you. I could have handled that better.
Right.
My apologies. Do you forgive me? How do we move forward? I have those conversations with them, because I know when they become adults, guess what? You're going to have those conversations with people that you love and are in relationships. So I practice that with them, and I think it's important as parents, as educators, as leaders, to do that. Male, female, son, daughters, it doesn't matter. We have to do a better job of that, so that we have more fully functioning adults.
No, absolutely.
That was my
No. Beautifully said. And I think, even to echo that last point, right? Like you said, modeling, that's a very good counseling term. We are always modeling.
Yeah.
Right. When it's young person, like, not necessarily when they're very, very young only, like, especially if you're working in a school, right? Like, that goes back to my point when I was talking about my client who is a teacher. I'm like, I remind him of that often. I'm like, listen, both as parents, and if you're fortunate enough to be a teacher, same thing. Like, you're modeling appropriate behavior. You have to consider it, like, whether you like it or not. Like, you have sort of a spotlight on you, and the kids are watching you. They're observing you. They're looking at your demeanor, your attitude, your tone, and the language that you choose to use with them. And I challenge him, particularly because of the community that he works in. He works in predominantly Black and Latino school, if I'm not mistaken. And so a lot of them, don't have father figures around as much, and it can be rather rough, the backgrounds that they come from, the homes that they come from. And so we talk a lot about working through that frustration, because, as a teacher, he's like, man, I really want the best for these kids, but it's hard because I'm sort of fighting their environment. And I'm like, yeah, brother, I get it. It's hard because you don't get to control that. All we get to control is our reactions and responses to these different situations. But one thing that you can do, to echo your point, one thing that we can do, whether you're a teacher or a parent, he happens to be both, we can control the way that we choose to engage with them, the way that we choose to respond to them. So maybe they aren't getting the best role models at home, and they are being taught to yell and scream and curse and argue and fight. And you can't hold yourself to this standard, like, I'm supposed to fix that, because that's not the purview of your power.
Yeah.
But you can express yourself in healthy ways that maybe maybe you plant the seed that might seep in their brain for a while, and maybe it takes a while to manifest, but maybe it will at some point. Like, you know
Mhm.
what? Mr. Cook he was always reasonable. You know, like he didn't scream at me, he didn't holler at me, he didn't disrespect me. If he did, he came back and talked to me about it to make me feel better. He allowed me to speak openly. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, again, especially if we talk about boys, but a lot of kids in general, they don't get those spaces to do that.
Yeah.
So creating those environments, again, very, very important. And absolutely what you said about it starts with us creating that environment with our children when they're young. And you talked about accountability. Like, I'm huge on that. That's a big one. One thing I'll just, to give you some context for that, like my father would almost never take responsibility for anything, like almost never apologize. The only time it would be was if it was like a severe beating, then maybe I would get it the same way I would get love afterwards. So the context of it was so skewed, it was so warped that it warped me because of my perception, right? You only know what's normal to you is only normal to you because it's what you experience.
Right.
Everybody doesn't have the same experience growing up.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it was very difficult for me to understand that. So if I continue to stay in those types of environments, it's going to be very difficult for me to be open later on. But if we make the intentional effort to take accountability, to apologize, to say we're sorry, to offer love and condolences more often, not just in certain circumstances, the kids will be more adjusted.
Yeah.
Right? They learn to express themselves, and then they don't need to punch a wall or kick a door or throw a desk or curse you out, because they understand how to use their words. You hurt me when you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
I felt disrespected when you fill in the blank.
Yep.
That's more productive. That's productive dialogue. It's not just sitting here, you said this, and then or the waterworks come down. You're just making me feel terrible about myself, but I have no idea how to give it back to you in a way that you can do something with it.
Right.